My name is Marissa Hale. I was 34 years old when my older sister decided, without asking, that my home was no longer mine. At the time, I thought my life was finally balanced. Not perfect, just steady. The kind of steady you earn after years of sacrificing weekends, sleep, and emotional bandwidth to build something that belongs to you. I run a boutique interior design firm called Stillwater Collective, specializing in luxury residential and hospitality spaces. My studio is a sleek, sun-washed space in the downtown arts district, but most days I work from home, drafting concepts, sourcing materials, reviewing blueprints between site visits that take me everywhere from Malibu cliff homes to West Hollywood loft conversions. But my Santa Monica penthouse was different. It wasn't just where I lived, it was my proof. 6 months earlier, I had finally bought my dream place, a 3-bedroom penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Pacific. I designed every inch myself. Coastal minimalism, crisp whites, pale oak floors, soft gray stone, clean lines, no clutter, no excess. A space that breathed. After years of cramped rentals and compromise, this apartment was quiet, intentional. Mine. My parents, Richard and Elaine Hale, lived in a modest ranch house in Pasadena. They were in their mid-60s, well-meaning, and eternally convinced that family should always help family. Then there was my sister, Danielle. Danielle was 3 years older than me, married to Mark with 2 kids, Ethan 9 and Lila 7. Where I planned, Danielle reacted. Where I calculated, she improvised. Our relationship wasn't hostile, but it was never close. We existed in parallel, orbiting the same family without ever truly intersecting. 3 weeks before everything unraveled, I hosted a housewarming party. 40 guests. Champagne flutes clinking as the sun dipped into the ocean. My wraparound terrace glowed with warm lighting. People wandered through my space in awe. A food blogger even asked to feature the setup. Danielle came with her entire family. My parents, too. Everyone smiled. Everyone complimented. Everyone told me how proud they were. I believed them. Then came the Tuesday morning call. "Marissa," Danielle said, her voice syrupy, "I need to ask you the biggest favor ever." My stomach tightened immediately. Our landlord is renovating the building. Major stuff. We need somewhere to stay for about a month. 5 weeks tops. I stared at my living room, at the perfect symmetry, at the silence. "Can't you stay with Mom and Dad?" She laughed. "Are you kidding? Their house is tiny. The kids would lose their minds." "But my place," she continued, "it's perfect. 3 bedrooms, so much space. We'd barely be in your way." Barely. I didn't want to say yes. Every instinct told me not to. But she was my sister, and she promised it was temporary. "Fine," I said, "but essentials only. I'm not turning my place into storage." She swore they'd be perfect guests. 2 days later, a U-Haul pulled up. My heart sank as box after box came up the elevator. By the time they finished unloading, my minimalist living room looked like a warehouse. "Danielle," I said, staring at the piles, "this isn't essentials." She shrugged. "Storage units are expensive." And then came the final blow. "Well, Mark and I will take the guest room. The kids can use your master. It's bigger. You can sleep in your office." Just like that, I lost my bedroom. That night, I lay on an air mattress beneath my drafting table, staring at the ceiling. And I knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. I told myself it was temporary. That was the lie I repeated every morning as I stepped carefully around towers of boxes and folded laundry that wasn't mine, as if my own apartment had become an obstacle course designed to test my patience. The first few days were loud, but tolerable. Kids always are. I tried to remind myself of that while Ethan and Lila sprinted through my living room after school, their sneakers squeaking against the pale oak floors I'd spent weeks selecting. They laughed, screamed, chased each other in circles around my designer coffee table like it was a playground prop. "Careful," I said more times than I could count. "Please don't run." They never listened. Danielle worked part-time at a boutique in Beverly Hills. She dropped the kids off at school in the morning, left for work, and was usually home by 2. Or at least, that's what she said. In reality, she texted me almost daily around 3:30. Meeting Amber for mani-pedis. Kids get home at 3:30. Thanks, babe. 2 pink hearts. Every time. The first afternoon it happened, I stared at my phone in disbelief. I had a client call scheduled, a serious one, a 7-figure residential project in Bel Air. I was supposed to be reviewing concept boards, not monitoring the clock like a babysitter waiting for a shift to start. Right on time, the front door burst open. "Aunt Marissa," Ethan yelled. "I'm bored." "I'm hungry," Lila added, dropping her backpack directly onto a custom linen chair. That first week, I tried. I really did. I made turkey and avocado wraps, fresh fruit salads, smoothies with almond milk and berries. I cut sandwiches into neat triangles and wiped sticky fingerprints off marble countertops with forced patience. But after 12-hour workdays that included site visits, conference calls, and design revisions, coming home to unpaid childcare felt like running a marathon after a sprint. By the end of the second week, I was exhausted. "You guys can make peanut butter and jelly," I told them one afternoon, opening my laptop for a deadline. "Everything's in the kitchen." They frowned but didn't argue. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. Danielle confronted me that night while I was mid-presentation rehearsal, pacing my office with my AirPods in. "Why are my kids surviving on peanut butter and goldfish?" she demanded, arms crossed. I muted my call. "Because I was working. You weren't here. I work too." "You work part-time," I said carefully, "and then you disappear while I watch your kids." She rolled her eyes. "What am I supposed to do? Cancel my plans? Maybe take care of your own children." Her expression hardened immediately. Things escalated the week I had to drive to San Diego to oversee a hotel renovation. I told Danielle the night before, "I'll be gone all day tomorrow." The next morning, as I grabbed my keys, she panicked. "You can't leave." "Why not?" "What am I supposed to do with Ethan and Lila? I have brunch plans in Manhattan Beach." "Then cancel them." "That's not fair," she snapped. "You're being selfish." I stared at her, stunned. "I'm being selfish? I'm going to work to pay for the apartment you're living in for free?" She actually stomped her foot. I left anyway. When I came home that night, my apartment sounded like a stadium. The TV blared at full volume. My parents were shouting at a basketball game. Ethan and Lila were running wild. Danielle lounged on the couch, laughing into her phone. "What's going on?" I asked. "Danielle called us," my mom said without looking away from the screen. "She said you abandoned the children." Abandoned. I bit. From that night on, my parents came over almost daily to help, which really meant more noise, more people, more chaos. The silver lining was my mother's cooking. Pot roast, casseroles, comfort food that tasted like childhood. But even that couldn't drown out the sense that my home was no longer a refuge. Every afternoon blurred into the same pattern. Screaming kids, blaring TV, overlapping conversations, Danielle on her phone, my parents shouting over each other because none of them could hear. I stopped working from home whenever I could. I took calls from my car, from cafes, from job sites, anywhere but the apartment I'd poured my soul into designing. The breaking point came on a Saturday. I had been in Laguna Beach all day overseeing a $200,000 kitchen renovation. Italian marble, custom cabinetry, precision details. By the time I drove back, it was after 9. I heard the music before I reached the elevator. Laughter echoed across the rooftop deck. When I stepped outside, my heart dropped. At least 20 people. Strangers. Beer bottles on my outdoor tables. Smoke curling into the night air. My expensive grill was in full use. Groceries I'd bought that morning, gone. No one had asked me. I plastered on a smile. I didn't want a scene. "Hey everyone," I said lightly. "Marissa!" My dad waved a beer. "We decided to have a little barbecue. Hope you don't mind." I minded. Desperately. But I said nothing. The party dragged on until nearly 11. When the guests finally left, my parents packed up. "Can you help me clean?" I asked. "Oh, honey," my mom sighed. "We're exhausted." They left. Danielle disappeared into her room. I cleaned alone for 2 hours. The next morning, I finally spoke up. "No more parties without asking me." "You're being ridiculous," my mom said. Danielle shrugged. "You're so uptight." Then I asked the question that changed everything. "When are you moving out?" Silence. "We gave up the apartment," Danielle said quietly. I felt sick. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't temporary at all. I didn't speak for a long moment. I just stood there in my own kitchen, staring at Danielle like she'd suddenly started speaking a language I didn't understand. "You gave up the apartment?" I repeated. Mark suddenly became very interested in his phone. My parents exchanged a glance that told me, instantly, they already knew. "The rent was going to increase after renovations," Danielle said quickly. "It didn't make sense to stay." "And when were you planning to tell me this?" "I'm telling you now." My chest tightened. "So the 1 month was never real." "Plans change, Marissa," my mom said gently. "That's life." No, that was manipulation. I walked into my office, closed the door, and sat at my desk with my laptop open, hands shaking just slightly. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't crying. That scared me more than anything else. I called Evan, a real estate agent I'd worked with for years. "I need rental listings. 2-bedroom apartments, Marina Del Rey, right now. Give me 10 minutes. When I returned to the living room, everyone looked at me like I'd gone mad. "What are you doing?" Danielle asked. "My phone's about to buzz," I said calmly. "When it does, you'll have options." It buzzed. I forwarded the email to her phone. 27 apartments in your price range, I said. "Start calling." Danielle's face flushed. "You're being insane." "We're family," my dad added. "You don't treat family like tenants." "Family doesn't lie about how long they're staying," I said. "Family doesn't throw parties in someone else's home. Family doesn't turn me into a free babysitter while they go out drinking." The room fell quiet. My parents left shortly after, clearly expecting me to backtrack. I didn't. A week later, the bills arrived. Electric, $418. Water, $143. Gas, triple my normal usage. Groceries? Nearly $1,200 instead of my usual $300. That night, I made an announcement over dinner. "If you're not moving out next month," I said, "we need new arrangements. Rent will be $1,500, plus half of utilities and groceries." Danielle nearly choked. "We're not paying you rent," Mark said flatly. "You're family. Then you have 2 weeks to find somewhere else. After that, I'm changing the locks." They stormed off. The next day, my parents showed up furious. "You can't throw your sister out on the street." "She's not on the street. She has options." "You're cruel," my mother said. "I'm protecting my home." They left angry. The apartment was quiet for 3 days, blissfully so. Then I had to go to Phoenix for a commercial design project. 3 days, important meetings, zero margin for distraction. When I returned Thursday night, I heard music echoing through the parking garage. I opened my door and froze. 25 people. Strangers. Wine bottles open. Shoes on my furniture. Someone smoking near the balcony. "What the hell is going on?" I shouted. Danielle stumbled toward me, clearly drunk. "Relax," she slurred. "This is my home." "If you don't like it," she added loudly, "you can leave." The room laughed. Someone yelled, "Yeah, get lost." I grabbed my purse and walked out. That night, I slept in a hotel. The next morning, I returned to devastation. Wine stains, cigarette burns, trash everywhere. I spent the morning packing their belongings, calmly, methodically. When Danielle returned with the kids and saw the boxes, she panicked. "You can't do this." "I already did." She cried. The kids looked scared. I hated myself for that part. But I didn't stop. An hour later, my parents called, screaming. I hung up. By Wednesday, they were gone. No note, no money, no apology. The apartment was silent again, and for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. The silence felt unnatural at first. When I walked through my apartment after Danielle and her family disappeared, It was almost eerie. No cartoons blaring from the television, no backpacks dropped in the hallway, no overlapping conversations, no slammed doors, no footsteps racing back and forth across my floors. Just quiet. I stood in the center of my living room and slowly turned in a circle, taking everything in like I was seeing it for the first time again. My sofa cushions were crooked. There were faint scratches on the coffee table. A wine stain still ghosted the corner of my white rug, no matter how much I scrubbed, but it was mine again. That first night alone, I didn't even turn on the TV. I opened the balcony doors and let the ocean air roll in, carrying salt and coolness with it. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, breathing deeply, trying to convince my nervous system that the danger had passed. I slept for 11 hours straight. The next few days were almost painfully peaceful. I worked uninterrupted for the first time in weeks. I cooked for myself again, simple meals, eaten slowly, without someone tugging on my sleeve or asking me to make something else. I lit candles in the evenings. I reorganized shelves that had been disturbed, returning objects to their proper places like a ritual of reclamation. No one called. Not Danielle, not Mark, not my parents. At first, I told myself that was a blessing. But as the days passed, the silence started to feel heavy. I'd opened my phone without thinking, expecting a text, an apology, an accusation, something. Instead, there was nothing. It was as if I'd been erased from the family entirely, written off as a problem they no longer wanted to deal with. The guilt crept in quietly. At night, I replayed the moment Danielle saw the boxes lined up by the door. The way Ethan's lower lip trembled. Lila's confused stare as she clutched her stuffed rabbit. I reminded myself over and over that I hadn't done this to them, that I had given warning after warning, that I had been generous to the point of self-erasure. Still, guilt doesn't care about logic. 2 weeks later, my mother finally called. I stared at the screen as it buzzed, my heart pounding in my chest. I answered, already bracing myself. "Marissa," she said, sounding exhausted. "We need to talk." She came over that afternoon, alone. She looked older than I remembered. Her shoulders sagged as she sat on my couch, eyes drifting around the apartment like she was seeing it through new lenses. "We kicked Danielle out 3 weeks ago," she said quietly. I blinked. "You... what?" "We couldn't take it anymore," she admitted. "She dropped the kids off every morning and disappeared. She didn't help with groceries. She didn't cook. Your father and I were exhausted." I felt a bitter sense of vindication rise in my chest, followed immediately by sadness. "How long did they stay?" I asked. 2.5 months. "Of course they did. Our bills doubled," she continued. "We even put groceries on your father's credit card. It was chaos." I nodded slowly. "Now you understand." She looked at me, eyes shining. "We do, and we're sorry. We should have supported you." That apology hit harder than any accusation ever had. We talked for over an hour, about boundaries, about enabling, about how loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for them. When she left, she hugged me tightly, whispering, "We missed you." For the first time in weeks, I cried. Life began to move forward after that. Work took off in ways I hadn't expected. Without constant interruptions, I landed 3 major contracts back to back. I hired 2 new designers. I started looking at expanding the studio. And somewhere in the middle of all that forward motion, Caleb came into my life. He was a contractor I'd worked with on multiple projects. Steady, grounded, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. We started with coffee after site visits, then dinners, then weekends. When I finally told him about Danielle, he didn't flinch. "You weren't harsh," he said simply. "You were protecting yourself." 8 months later, I ran into Mark at Trader Joe's. He looked uncomfortable, but sincere. "We messed up," he said quietly. "We took advantage of you." It wasn't everything, but it was something. Another year passed. Danielle and Mark divorced. Money issues, responsibility, patterns that had never changed. When my mother told me, I felt a pang of sadness, but no surprise. Life, it seemed, had finally caught up to the truth. And for the first time since this all began, I felt like I was no longer running from chaos. I had outgrown it. By the time Danielle and Mark's divorce became official, I was no longer surprised by anything that involved my sister. Still, hearing the words out loud hit differently. My mom called on a quiet Tuesday evening while I was finishing dinner. Caleb was sitting across from me at the kitchen island, scrolling through emails on his phone, when I froze mid-bite. "They're getting divorced," she said. I set my fork down slowly. "What happened?" she exhaled. "Money, fighting, Danielle refusing to take responsibility for, well, anything. Mark finally had enough." I glanced at Caleb. He didn't interrupt, just reached across the counter and rested his hand over mine. "Where are Ethan and Lila?" I asked. "They're staying with Mark. Danielle moved in with a friend in the valley. She's working part-time at a department store now." I felt a familiar, unwelcome ache in my chest. Not for Danielle, but for the kids. "Did she ask you and Dad for help?" I asked quietly. "She tried," my mom admitted. "We said no." That stopped me. "You said no?" "We learned our lesson," she said gently. "We can't keep rescuing her. It only makes things worse." For the first time in my adult life, I felt something close to pride in my parents. After that call, I stood alone on my balcony for a long time, watching the ocean darken as the sun disappeared. I thought about how many times Danielle had been shielded from consequences, how often my parents had smoothed things over, paid bills, offered excuses. When the safety net disappeared, she didn't suddenly learn how to fly. She fell. Life, meanwhile, continued to expand for me. My firm signed its biggest contract yet, a full interior design package for a luxury apartment complex in Beverly Hills. 32 units, a career-defining project. I hired more staff, leased additional studio space, and found myself working with a sense of clarity I'd never known before. Without chaos, everything sharpened. Caleb and I grew closer too. He moved at a steady pace, never pushing, never crowding. When he stayed over, he respected my space like it was sacred, which, in many ways, it was. One night, months later, while we sat on the couch with the balcony doors open, he asked softly, "Do you miss her?" I thought about it. "I miss who I wanted her to be," I said, "not who she actually is." He nodded. "That makes sense." About 6 months after the divorce, my parents invited me to dinner. Just the three of us, no Danielle. No tension hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Halfway through dessert, my dad cleared his throat. "We owe you an apology," he said. My mom nodded. "We enabled Danielle for years. We thought we were helping. We weren't." I swallowed hard. "Thank you for saying that." It didn't erase the past, but it acknowledged it. And that mattered. Danielle didn't reach out. According to my mom, she blamed me for everything. For losing her apartment, for the divorce, for being abandoned by the family. I had stopped trying to correct that narrative. Some people don't want the truth. They want a villain. A year later, Caleb proposed. It wasn't flashy, no crowd, no cameras. Just us, standing on the balcony at sunset, the ocean glowing beneath us. "Yes," I said without hesitation. We married the following spring at a vineyard in Napa Valley. 75 guests, perfect weather. My parents cried through the entire ceremony. Danielle wasn't invited. My parents told me she probably wouldn't have come anyway. During the reception, my dad pulled me aside. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. "You built a beautiful life." "And I'm sorry," he added. "It took us too long to see the truth." He was right. They hadn't raised a cruel daughter. They had raised one who finally learned to say no. 2 years after the night I packed my sister's belongings into boxes, my life looked nothing like it had back then. The chaos was gone. In its place was something quieter, stronger, built deliberately. Caleb and I settled into a rhythm that felt natural, not forced. Mornings started with coffee on the balcony, the ocean stretching endlessly in front of us. Evenings ended with conversations that didn't drain me, with laughter that didn't feel like damage control. My business continued to grow. The Beverly Hills project launched successfully, earning industry attention I'd never chased but deeply appreciated. New clients followed, bigger ones, more selective ones. For the first time in my career, I wasn't just surviving success, I was enjoying it. My parents became regulars again in my life. Sunday dinners returned, just like before everything fell apart. But something was different now. They asked before making plans. They listened when I spoke. They respected the boundaries I'd once been shamed for setting. Danielle's name wasn't mentioned during those dinners. Not because it was forbidden, but because none of us knew what to say anymore. According to my mom, Danielle bounced between friends' couches for months after the divorce. She complained constantly about the kids being turned against her, about money, about how unfair life had become. She says you ruined her life, my mom told me once, quietly. I didn't react. Do you want me to talk to her? She asked carefully. No, I said. I want her to stop making me the reason for her choices. My mom nodded. She didn't argue. That alone told me how far we'd come. About a year into my marriage, my phone buzzed with a text while I was reviewing design plans. Mom, Christina got evicted from her friend's place. She's asking if she can stay with us. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back, me. What did you tell her? The reply came a minute later. Mom, we said no. We're too old for that kind of chaos. I smiled. That night, I sat on my couch with Caleb, legs tucked beneath me, the apartment wrapped in quiet. No noise, no tension, no fear of what I'd come home to. Just peace. I used to think saying no made me selfish, I admitted softly. Caleb looked at me. What do you think now? I think it saved my life. There's a myth that cutting off or even stepping back from family makes you a bad person. That blood excuses behavior. That love means endurance without limits. I used to believe that. But here's what I learned the hard way. You cannot help people who refuse responsibility. You cannot sacrifice your stability to preserve someone else's comfort. And you cannot build a healthy life while constantly cleaning up someone else's mess. Danielle didn't fail because I enforced boundaries. She failed because she never learned to live without someone cushioning her fall. As for me, I chose differently. I chose to protect my home, my finances, my mental health, my marriage, and I have never regretted that choice. Sometimes family isn't who shares your blood. It's who respects your boundaries, celebrates your growth, and doesn't punish you for succeeding. I learned that lesson late, but thoroughly, and I will never forget it.